Guys, let's start in the SEC. And let's start with the two-time defending champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, it's easy to say that, well, we can't see a way that this team doesn't make the playoff, right? They're too talented. They're going to coast into the playoff, and that's their worst case scenario is losing in the semis to Michigan or TCU, of course. So I'm sure we'll be back in the national championship race this year, or Ohio State or whoever we want to say, right? Am I off base here, Ari? Is there a lower floor for Georgia than in the playoff?
The floor for Georgia is losing in the playoff. The ceiling is winning in the playoff. It's like a 2-game season for them. I don't know.
That's a low house. That's like a 4 foot. That's like a 4 foot range. You better be crawling around that house.
What would have to happen in Georgia for them to lose 2 games in the schedule? Let's come up with some sci-fi.
It's easy, Ari. Carson Beck stinks and Mike Bobo stinks. It's very possible. I'm just saying. Get them to 2 losses.
What 2 teams would beat them on this schedule if their quarterback was just fine?
If their quarterback was, I'm saying if he's worse
not going to, but if he's worse than fine, then they have other people that will come in. They're not going to have an awful quarterback.
Kentucky can do it. Ole Miss can do it. Tennessee can do it.
In what world can Kentucky do it? I'd love to hear in the world where
Devin Leary is a baller and they can't score, and Kentucky puts up 27 points.
Have you ever watched Georgia play football before? I'm just wondering. Wondering.
If your quarterback's turning the ball over and stinks, you get.
What do you think this is? Like a cut scene from The Waterboy? Like, he's not going to turn the ball over 7 times. Georgia literally sucks the life out of you. Kentucky is not beating Georgia. What are you doing?
Listen,
it's not happening.
What is the floor? Kenny, am I crazy? Is there a floor where Georgia does not make the playoff? What's the point? Mr. Ari, regular season here. We want to make all the games matter. Well, then what's the point of even playing the next 12 games?
They don't play any good games. It's not my fault their schedule stinks.
I could see a floor where Georgia doesn't make the playoffs. I mean, if they lose 1 game in the regular season, which is possible, and I understand Ari's point that Georgia is dominant, but they did almost lose to Missouri last year. That was a game where they were down and had a ferocious run in the 4th quarter. But to act like Georgia's invincible against perceivably subpar opponents, I mean, we've seen that to be the case that they can't get beat. So if they lose 1 game in the regular season and then go into the SEC championship with 1 loss and lose that game against either an Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, whoever that is, with 2 losses, we've seen that be the kiss of death in the playoff committee's eyes. And Georgia's schedule is not going to do them any favors. They're not going to have really any marquee wins to stand on, which is something that hurt Alabama last year. So 1 loss in the regular season, a loss in the SEC championship, and Georgia's not in the playoffs. So I could see it. Is it likely? Not really, but I can see it for sure.
Did Kenny say 1 loss in the regular season and then losing the SEC championship game?
Yes.
Okay, because I was going to push back at the notion that they could lose a game and then wouldn't get in. I think a 1-loss SEC champion is in 100% of the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you would have to lose a game in the regular season, which they'll get a mulligan for, because if they lose in the regular season, they're still probably going to be in Atlanta. And then once you're in Atlanta playing in an indoor dome with those animals that are on that team, I don't know, they could play a really good team on the other end of it. They could play Bama or whatever, like they always do, and lose that game. I guess theoretically speaking, you could just be like, well, they almost lost to Mizzou last year, so they're definitely capable of losing again. They didn't lose to Mizzou. And when's the last time Georgia was actually upset? Was it when they lost to South Carolina in 2019? Is that the last time it happened?
Yeah.
What game on this? And I'm not going to join you on the Kentucky can beat Georgia bandwagon. If that happens, that would be remarkable, and we'll talk about it when it does. But that's not something you predict. So
not necessarily predict, but theoretically possible. Yes, and I do think. Ari, you're underrating a lot of these dynamics. 2 things. One, when you're replacing as many pieces as Georgia does, there's always that level of doubt. You have a new OC. When you got the players that Georgia has, things tend to look really good, and you got good players. But I think the thing that, and our colleague Seth Emerson has talked about this a little bit this offseason, if possible, that some teams are going to be able to run on Georgia this year. They don't have the big space eater. You don't have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis in the middle of the paint.
And it's very easy to lose track about how special those guys were.
Yes,
they were actually really, really, really special players. Yeah, I can buy that. Yeah.
And so if teams, if you don't have all of a sudden, hey, we're going to throw 4 guys at you and we can get to the pass with those 4 guys and you can't run on us with those 4 guys, plus the linebackers, don't overrate, losing the type of linebacker play that they did. And not to say that Georgia doesn't bring a ton back, but it's possible. So
yeah, it's highly unlikely to me.
But
it's highly unlikely to me that Carson Beck just stinks. He might not be special, but he's going to be a serviceable player and they have a lot of talent around him. And it's just like, I'm looking at the schedule. It's like, are they going to lose to South Carolina? No. At Auburn, I guess could be tricky if you freeze dial some stuff up, but probably not.
Yeah, maybe.
At home against Kentucky, that's not even a road game. Like, throw that one out. You have Florida and you have Ole Miss and you have at Tennessee on the road. And like, I know that there's a lot that has changed in, Athens since last year's Tennessee game, but that was like, I had to turn it off because like I got sick to my stomach. I felt bad for Tennessee. Like I was like, are they going to stop? Somebody.
It was tough. It was tough watch.
And like you think if they're going to like stop that gap in 1 year with Joe Milton, like it's just a hard sell for me. So my idea, the one thing that concerns me with Georgia, and I don't know if this is cliche or not, but stop me if it is there is a certain temperament in sports where once you've reached the mountaintop and then you've gone back again, that there's a desire or a complacency that just in human nature that sneaks in, and like the want to and the desire to win again has to be innate. And what Nick Saban has done at Alabama is continually, or at least 90% of the time, get the best out of his players, regardless of what has already been accomplished. And like, this is a very interesting year for Kirby Smart, and the idea that, Georgia is going to have to prove, like, are they a team that is turning into Alabama, or do they have a really cool 2-year run? Like, is this the manifestation of becoming the next Nick Saban and the next Alabama, or not? So to me, if this team lost with the team that they have coming back 2 games and didn't make the playoff this year, that would be a huge disappointment and also a very big red flag for me in the idea of Georgia doing the Sabanation of the SEC, which is taking it over. So it's a very critical year for me in Georgia and the way that we perceive them as well, in my opinion.
For the record, I think Georgia's in the playoff. I think they coast in the playoff, but I'm going to entertain the possibility that they don't.